So now that we've got our wheel off the bike, we can deal with our flat tire. In order to actually deal with a flat tire and repair it, we have to remove the entire inner tube from inside the tire. You start at the side opposite to where the valve is. So I insert the hook of the tire lever onto the edge of the tire. The edge of the tire is also called a bead. Okay? We hook onto the bead of the tire, making sure that we've only caught the bead of the tire. And the way that we know that we've only caught the bead of the tire and we haven't accidentally hooked into the soft rubber inner tube is by sliding that hook back and forth along the edge of the tire. If it slides easily, it tells us that we've only hooked into the edge of the tire and we haven't accidentally grabbed onto the soft rubber inner tube. Okay, once we've caught that, we can simply flip that edge over the rim of the tire and hook the other side onto a spoke. We then will need at least one more tire lever in order to hook onto another part of the bead of the tire and flip it. There is another way and another tool for doing the same thing, and I think it's a little easier to use. And that's something called the speed lever. And the speed lever uses a process similar to the mechanism used to take car tires off of rims. And again, it consists of a little hook at one end, and that hook again hooks onto the edge of the tire. Make sure that you only have the edge of the tire by sliding back and forth, and then flip that over and extend into the axle of the wheel. Then work slowly back and forth along the bead of the tire, freeing the inner tube that may have in fact glued itself inside the tire. If it is sticky inside there, just work slowly back and forth, be patient, and eventually it will free up and the speed lever simply spins around, removing the entire edge of the tire from the rim. This gives us access to the inner tube, and we can simply grab onto the inner tube and pull it out of the tire, finishing at the valve. Turn that around and remove the inner tube. But before I'm ready to actually put this into the tire, it's very important that you carefully inspect the inside of the tire, because whatever caused your puncture, if it's still embedded in the tire, it's going to cause a fresh puncture in your perfectly good inner tube, meaning that you'll have to start this whole process all over again. So let's avoid that by inspecting very carefully the inside of the tire, making sure that whatever caused that puncture is not still embedded in the tire. While I've got the tire off the rim, is carefully inspect the inner surface of the rim. Once you've assured yourself that there are no further hazards in your tire, you're ready to reassemble it. Okay, so remember, I've put a little bit of air in my inner tube, making it a lot easier to deal with. I make sure that the label of the tire is lined up with the valve hole, and I insert the valve adjacent to the label of the tire. The main reason that I line up the valve with the label of the tire is so that I have a point of reference, so that if I discover that I had a puncture at this point on the inner tube, I have a reference. I know to look over here or possibly over here for the culprit that caused that puncture. So I'm going to start by inserting the tube inside the tire. By doing that, I turn the tire and the tube, which are two things, into a single unit, a tire and tube unit. Okay, so I started at the side where the valve is. It should never look like the tube is too big to fit inside the tire. Sometimes if you've pulled the tube in the process of putting it inside the tire, you may have stretched it. So back off and line it up. The other thing is that if you put a little too much air in the tube to give it shape, let a little bit of that air out. The tube should actually lie reasonably flat inside the tire and on the rim itself. The next step is to roll the tube into position. I really don't want the tube to be protruding between the rim and the tire. The next step is to put the bead of the tire back on the rim. And I start where the valve is. And I start by inserting the bead of the tire at the valve stem and very carefully working using the heels of my hands that bead of the tire back onto the rim. Push up and feel the seat of the tire raise up inside the tire. Okay, that will tell you that it isn't caught underneath the edge of the tire. It's now safe to proceed, and I can work very carefully the rest of the tire back onto the rim. Let's make it easier on ourselves by using our thumbs to push the bead into the center, working around the tire like that. And it will give us a lot more slack at this end. Hook onto the metal and use leverage to slowly coax the bead of the tire onto the rim. If you're using the tire lever, you just simply slide the bead of the tire up onto the rim and you're done. So let's do this with the speed lever. And again, I like the speed lever because it's quicker and it's easier to use. There is a special hook on the speed lever designed just to put the tire back on the rim. And again, it's very important that you make sure that there's no inner tube caught in between the tire and the rim. And then you simply hook that special side onto the rim and extend it to the axle and rotate the tire onto the rim. Okay, so that's how you do that. We want to make sure that the inner tube is actually seated up inside the tire. In order to do that, pinch the inner tube to make sure that there isn't any tube protruding between the edge of the tire and the rim. We do something called walking the dog, where we just simply pinch all the way around as we walk around the circumference of the tire, inspecting inside to make sure that there's no inner tube caught between the tire and the rim. Now that we've satisfied ourselves that the tube is in the right place, that it's not caught between the tire and the rim, we're ready to inflate the tire to pressure. Pump the tire up to pressure, and away we go. So now that you know how to deal with your flat tires, you can go out and ride with confidence. But go home and practice this when you're not under pressure. It's important that you feel comfortable dealing with a flat, because after all, now that you understand how tires work, you'll be able to avoid getting flat tires. And hopefully your flats will be very rare occurrences that you can deal with quickly and efficiently. Have a good ride.